We began this hour with escalating tensions in the Middle East. Last night, the State Department ordered all non-emergency U.S. employees in Iraq to evacuate the country. Workers at the embassy in Baghdad and the American consulate in Erbil have been ordered to leave immediately. The U.S. sent an aircraft carrier and 4 B-52 bombers to the Persian Gulf last week. President Trump denies a report saying the U.S. has a plan to send 120,000 troops to the region should Iran target American interests. Well, these moves come as American officials believe that Iran sabotaged 4 oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. Iran denies any involvement. Last night, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also refused to publicly blame Iran. And now the New York Times reports that our European allies do not think Tehran is raising the stakes in the region. Rather, they believe National Security Advisor John Bolton is telling President Trump to, quote, back Iran into a corner. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin joins me now from the Pentagon. So, David, to this report about the growing tensions with Iran, there seems to be some dissent in the international community about the threat level in Iraq. On Tuesday, there was a British Major General who said that we don't see an increased threat at this stage, that he was referring to an Iraqi Shiite militia there in the region. Who's right on this, David, and what do we know about the threat?
Well, I can just tell you what my American sources tell me, and they say that the threat of attack by Shia Iranian-backed militia in Iraq, these are militia which are nominally under the control of the Iraqi government, but really take their marching orders from Tehran. The threat of attack by these Shia militia against U.S. facilities or U.S. personnel is credible and real. And specifically, they say that Shia militia have been observed moving rockets into position where, if fired in the right direction, they would have the range to hit American personnel or facilities. Now, when that British general yesterday made the statement that there was no increased threat from Shia militia, the U.S. Central Command, which is the overarching command for that area, put out a statement saying that just runs counter to our intelligence. And it's very rare for the U.S. military to repudiate a statement made by one of its allies. So it's very clear that the U.S. military feels pretty strongly about the reliability of this intelligence. And then on top of that, Secretary of State Pompeo actually put his money where the intelligence was and ordered what will be a complicated and costly withdrawal of non-essential personnel, diplomatic personnel from the embassy in Baghdad and the consulate in Erbil.
I want to also ask you, we know that there isn't currently a defense secretary, acting defense secretary at this moment, Shanahan, who the president has put forward to be the actual defense secretary. In the past, when General Mattis has agreed on things, he has pushed back very aggressively, we know, and as you know. Is there any concern in Pentagon quarters that if Shanahan were to come forward, that he wouldn't stand a chance against Mike Pompeo and John Bolton? Would he be outmaneuvered?
Well, U.S. officials insist that the request to send these forces, the aircraft carrier and the bombers, didn't come from Mike Pompeo or John Bolton. They came from the military commander for the Middle East, General Frank McKenzie. It was his intelligence that spotted what he deemed to be these threats, and it was his request to send these additional forces. So at least for the moment, it is not a question of the acting Secretary of Defense, Patrick Shanahan, being outmaneuvered by John Bolton or Mike Pompeo. He is simply responding to a request from one of his most senior commanders. Now, that said, Patrick Shanahan has made no secret that he intends to make, as in his words, the Department of Defense the Department of Yes. So if the White House wants a briefing on what the Pentagon would do if tens of thousands of more troops were needed in the Persian Gulf to counter Iran, he's going to provide that briefing. And I think you could make the case, because it happened on other subjects when Secretary of Mattis was Secretary of Defense, he slow-rolled these requests. But remember this, at the end of the day, Patrick Shanahan does not work for Mike Pompeo. He does not work for John Bolton. He works for President Trump. And President Trump has made it pretty clear he has no interest in sending tens of thousands of more troops to the Persian Gulf or getting in a war with Iran.
David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thank you.